Hi, it's Dwyer, Gambler's Advisory, with some post-fight comments on the fight at 140 pounds that took place today between Juan Diaz, who won their first fight, and Paulie Malignaggi. Now, I had Malignaggi winning on my scorecard, and I agree with the scoring. I thought that Malignaggi simply was the faster fighter, the crisper fighter. More importantly, though, I thought that this is a fight that people have to look at because I believe it showed a lot of strengths and weaknesses of the two fighters. Let me talk about Juan Diaz. Juan Diaz is what I call a pattern fighter. Um, I don't believe Juan Diaz is a counterpuncher. I don't believe Juan Diaz changes his style too often. Um, I believe he fights the same way regardless of the style of his opponent. And let me just say, Juan Diaz, and that's often the case, by the way, with fighters who've been fighting their entire lives. They'll come up with a formula that works for them when they're 16 years old, and then they'll keep using that same formula in the ring. Compare and contrast that with someone like a Sergio Martinez, who took up the sport a little bit later and who interprets the sport differently. Martinez seems to be someone who picks up skills, who changes his strategy depending on his opponent, who has literally evolved over time. If you look at films of Martinez from 10 years ago and you contrast them with who he is today, you'll see different styles. You'll see the evolution of a fighter. Contrast that with Juan Diaz, who was very successful very early in his career. His nickname's the Baby Bull. He's still in his 20s. He was champion for several years. And it's clear that Juan Diaz is like a fastball pitcher who, knows that his 98 mile an hour fastball can get people out. And so he doesn't really and hasn't really wasted a lot of time coming up with clever off speed pitches, really learning how to pitch, really thinking through how to do things in different situations. So here, Juan Diaz fought this fight just like he fought the first fight, whereas Malignaggi, who recently changed trainers away from Buddy McGirt, you can tell that Malignaggi is a bit of a different fighter than he was even in the first fight. He's moving a lot more. Buddy McGirt apparently had him relatively stationary against Ricky Hatton. Malignaggi, who did switch out to a new trainer before the first fight, clearly has developed a lot since then, and he's moving a lot more. He started this fight relatively flat-footed, but then he started moving, and it was clear that Juan Diaz has a problem with movement. Diaz is a very average fighter when the guy in front of him can hit and move. Now, what that means for gamblers and boxing fans is I believe Juan Diaz would have a big problem with fighters in his division, elite fighters like Timothy Bradley, who beat Lamont Peterson tonight, and Johan Guzman, who got a gift draw against Ali Faneca. Both of these guys move in the ring. Diaz seems to need to have you be relatively stationary for him to be effective. Um, think about some of the people he's beaten. Michael Casitas, right in front of you, a banger. That fight was a dramatic fight, but again, Casitas is not a guy who moves a lot. Acelino Freitas, right in front of you. Again, very dramatic fight, very career-defining fight. But again, Freitas is not someone who moved a lot in the ring. Now, it's my belief that anyone can be beaten. Styles make fights. A fighter who moves and can throw combinations, like Malignaggi, is exactly the kind of fighter that beats Juan Diaz. Let's go further. We already know Juan Diaz cannot handle crisp counterpunching. right? We know that because the relatively stationary Nate Campbell was able to stand right in front of him and take his title in Houston. Think about that. Very hard to win in Houston. No one knows that better than Paulie Malignaggi. Yet that's exactly what Nate Campbell did, and he busted up Diaz's eye. That eye was busted up again today. I think it's something to look out for because Diaz, quite frankly, with his boxing style, can't protect that eye from being busted up. Diaz has a cut problem, and it's bad because even if he's able to fight on with the cut, understand that these cuts influence judges. You see one guy bleeding from the eye, and you then start thinking he's losing the fight. Um, Diaz lost to Nate Campbell. He also lost to Juan Manuel Marquez, and we know while Marquez is a counterpuncher par excellence. In fact, I believe Marquez is the second best boxer in the sport. Marquez isn't that fleet of foot. So Marquez was right in front of Diaz. Diaz did well early in the fight and then ultimately got stopped in the 8th round. So I believe Diaz can't handle movement. He can't handle crisp counterpunching. Let's talk about his footwork. Take a look at Diaz's footwork. You're going to see that you know exactly which way Diaz is leaning. You can actually figure out whether Diaz can throw power shots just by looking at his legs. He has the same problem that Ricky Hatton has. And if you look at that Manny Pacquiao fight, it's clear that Pacquiao understood that Hatton had to lean on his left leg first, then he had a hitch in his left. So that first knockdown, Manny Pacquiao knew that once he saw Hatton on that left leg, he had a little opening to nail Hatton with his left hand. Excuse me, in fact, it's a right hand. He was able to step in and nail Hatton with his right hand before Hatton came over the top with a left hook. That's the first knockdown in that fight, right? A fighter with a foot problem, a fighter who tips his punches because of his legs, is a fighter with a disability, right? That's why Roy Jones was looking down when he was fighting Felix Trinidad. That's why people could figure out when Trinidad was throwing that left hook. That's why Oscar De La Hoya knew if he kept moving and kept Trinidad moving his feet, he was going to dominate their initial fight. Well, Diaz has the same problem. Right now, Pacquiao's trainer, Freddie Roach, must be drooling because Freddie Roach has a champion at 140, Amir Khan, and I believe Amir Khan would take out Juan Diaz. I believe Khan would literally be looking at Diaz's feet. He would realize he's fighting a bit of a bit of a Hatton clone, and he'd be able to exploit the footwork problem. So I believe Diaz would do better against stationary fighters, an Edwin Valerio, for example, maybe an Ali Faneka if he could get under that big jab, than he would against fighters who move. And Paulie Malignaggi moves, Paulie Malignaggi counterpunches. Now let me just say this about Malignaggi. He clearly has a serious right shoulder problem. I didn't see Paulie Malignaggi throw too many overhand rights. And for a guy with blinding hand speed in his left, it's a little bit startling that Malignaggi doesn't have any blinding hand speed with his right hand. I believe his right shoulder seems to be destroyed. That's why he hasn't had any knockouts now for more than 5 years. He hurt Diaz with the right uppercut. It seems he can throw the right uppercut, but it doesn't seem like Malignaggi has full range of motion in that right shoulder. I believe there's a bit of a cover-up going on there. If you're a Malignaggi fan, just understand that against people at the upper end of the sport, the Sergio Martinezes of the world who study and who have diversified games, they could literally exploit that right shoulder problem. In other words, a Floyd Mayweather, were he down at 140, would be able to exploit that right shoulder Malignaggi problem. Thanks for watching. I'm out of time. Peace.